Welcome. I can see that people are logging on to the webinar as we are starting up here in just south of Oslo in Fredrikstad in Norway. It's a beautiful day here with fantastic summer weather, and it is great to also see that we are getting a little bit more back to normal in Norway when it comes to Corona and the virus situation. So today I am in the office. We have slowly started to move back into the office, and things are slowly starting to normalize here. So we are now. Yeah, so the participants are still coming in, and we are just 1 minute over 10. So we'll not start the presentation yet, but we have somewhere between 50 and 60 participants today. So we are very happy to see that so many of you are interested in this topic about how to track and document renewable energy. It is a topic that we find very interesting, so very happy that you share that interest with us. I will share my presentation with you now, and we will start to jump into the topic. So just as an introduction, my name is Petter Kildal. I will be the host for this webinar. I'm the CEO of BECOUR, and as I said, we are looking very much forward to share our thoughts and ideas, and also knowledge about renewable energy with guaranteed origin. And we hope for a very interactive and good session with you. So we really hope that you use the chat function and add your questions as we move through. We will try to answer all the questions throughout the presentation, but we will also be present 30 minutes after the webinar in itself has ended for a Q&A session. And during the presentation, I would like to tell you that you are all muted, so please use the chat function to address any questions or comments that you might have. And I will read the questions and comments loud and try to answer them as we go through. The goal of this webinar is to share knowledge about renewable energy or energy attribute certificates, what it is and how it impacts your carbon emissions, your scope 2 emissions, and also get into what kind of building blocks you as a company need when you want to build a renewable energy strategy, and also to enable you to use the renewable energy documentation for more than just ticking a box, so that you can be transparent and impactful in your action. And also we want to present some initiatives that might make it easier for you to source renewable energy. My history in this game, or in this market, you might say, is long. I have been participating in the development of renewable energy with guaranteed origin since it all started in Europe in the late autumn of 1999. And it has been a fascinating journey, I must say, to be allowed to develop this mechanism so that energy users actually can choose how their electricity is being produced, and being able to document that in a credible way. And it has been a very interesting journey, because it has also really kicked off and grown exponentially since we started this in 2001. And this has now become a large market, and it's growing also exponentially now outside Europe at the moment. But this is not really about sorry, let's move to screen a bit. So this is not really about the technical system in itself. We have to put this into a broader context. So the broader context here is that this is about how renewable energy is important for companies around the globe, because how the electricity we consume is produced is important. It's not really about the technical system, about EACs or GOs or IRECs. It's about how electricity is produced and how important that is for how we live. As you know, different sources of energy has different impacts on how we live, and it might be on the CO2 emissions, it might be on local impacts, it might be on waste and also emissions to the air. And a rhetorical question here might be that, so if you could choose between coal-fired electricity, nuclear, or clean, renewable, green, beautiful hydropower, what would you actually choose? Of course, that is a rhetorical question, but it's also a relevant question for you and your stakeholders. And for us, this is about helping companies to source renewable energy in a way that adds value to the company's products and services and brands. And we see that this can be done in several ways, of course. You might just tick the box, buy GOs from the market and tick the box in your CDP report or whatever you report to and be done with it. But that is, for us, less than half the story. It is much more to this than just ticking the box. BECOUR was founded in 2018, but we have been around, the people in BECOUR has been around in this market since it started in 1999, as I mentioned. And we are developing solutions for companies and electricity suppliers, where the goal is to link producers of renewable energy directly to the consumers of electricity. And we do that globally. And one more thing I want to mention here is that we, in order to enable you as an energy user or representative of an energy user to actually source renewable energy transparently with impact and environmental credibility, we launched this, you might call it a web platform or a web shop called React last year, where we present the uniqueness of each and every power station so that you can choose what you like and what you want to see, and don't rely on others making the choices on behalf of you. Before moving into the solutions, I just want to provide a diagram showing the concept of energy attribute certificates. As all of you know, it is a challenge to track electrons. Like electrons in the grid doesn't have any attributes. There's no quality to the electrons. They are just doing energy work in the grid. So when an energy user wants to document that they use renewable energy, we cannot physically track the electrons from a windmill park to an energy consumer. That's not possible. So we need a different mechanism when you want to document and track. In this context, we use a mass balance principle for tracking non-physical attributes. And when I say non-physical attributes, I mean attributes that are not tangible. You cannot sort of touch or feel or taste if it's green or gray or blue or orange electricity. So that's these non-physical attributes. And we use mass balance to monitor that an equal amount of renewable energy has been put on the grid, equal to what you take off the grid. We can use money as an analogy. So when I get my salary, I don't get physical coins and money from BECOUR. I just get a salary statement that shows that there has been poured a certain amount of kroners onto my bank account. And when I withdraw money through the mini bank or cash machine, I don't get BECOUR money out of the machine. I only get unspecified money out of the machine. But I have my salary statement as a guarantee of origin on the fact that there has been poured an equal amount of money onto the account as I withdraw. And this is what we show with this sketch here. You have different energy sources from the left putting electrons on the grid. Some are green and some are not green. And the green alternatives, or the renewable alternatives, are not just putting electrons on the grid, they're also then issuing energy attribute certificates, which are put into a bank system for certificates and stay there until a customer or energy user want to buy electrons from the grid and document that an equal amount has been produced in a specific windmill park. And then you take these energy attribute certificates off the market. So it's a mass balance system based on the same principle as we are operating with money every day. So it's very familiar to most of us if we think about it. So what are the different alternatives? Yeah, I get a question here. There are some that say that they don't are hearing us. If you hear me, could you just give me a note on the chat so that I know that you're actually hearing what I'm saying? Okay, it seems like people are hearing me, so that's good to know. Unless that would be a little bit of a difficult situation for you to follow. Great, thank you so much. There are some options out there, and you have all heard about corporate PPAs, solar rooftops, and all these solutions that are out there. And I just wanted to go through with you how these different alternatives come together and how they are interacting and how they can in the end also be part of your renewable energy strategy. First of all, we have on-site production, meaning that you, within your own premises, put up maybe a solar rooftop on your buildings and produce your own renewable energy on your own roof. In order for that to be a credible solution, when you want to claim to use renewable energy, you must be assured that nobody else uses the same renewable energy in their claims. So in that case also, the energy attribute certificates plays a role. You have to make sure that the energy attribute certificates are not used by somebody else. So on-site production can not be a claim unless you are assured that the energy attribute certificates are also taken away and cancelled only for your consumption. Secondly, we have direct investments. Let's say that you have a strategy where you want to build your own wind farms, becoming an investor in renewable energy production. That's what we call direct investments. So off-site, outside your own premises, you build renewable energy that you own yourself. So then you are an investor and a producer of renewable energy. But if you don't claim the energy attribute certificates, you cannot claim to use the renewable energy. Then you're just an investor. So also here, you have to bundle the energy attribute certificates into the solution in order to make a credible claim to renewable energy. Thirdly, we have a topic of power purchase agreements or corporate power purchase agreements, meaning that a corporate directly contract with a producer of renewable energy often also then located to a specific windmill park or a specific production site of renewable energy. So a corporate PPA in its pure nature is a long-term price hedge for the electricity. So in its pure nature, a PPA is not a claim to use renewable energy. It's only a price hedging mechanism over a long period of time, maybe many, many years, maybe 10, 15 years. So also here, you need to use the energy attribute certificates to claim the attributes of the renewable energy that you have a corporate PPA with. So as you see here, these mechanisms are in place in the market, but it is important for me to bring across the fact that you, in order to make a credible claim, have to consider how you may also operate with the energy attribute certificates. On the top here, we have a final solution, and that is for the companies that don't have the balance sheet or the stability in their electricity consumption or the premises to build their own renewable energy. For those, to buy the energy attribute certificates separate from these three solutions is absolutely an alternative, which we see that more and more companies actually do. I here also have noted that there's two solutions on the top, bundled or unbundled, and that is just simply that you can buy the energy attribute certificates together with from your electricity supplier, or you can buy them separately from your electricity supplier. Yes, here we have a question. The question is, can you please elaborate on the difference between buying bundled and unbundled certificates? What additional value do I get from unbundled certificates? Very good question. And we see that this is a question that comes up again and again for corporate energy buyers. And we will get back to it later on in the presentation, but just briefly to give you an overview of the topic. When you buy bundled EACs or energy attribute certificates, you have an electricity contract with the electricity supplier, and the electricity supplier decides what energy attribute certificates that you get. So by bundling, you trust your electricity supplier to make the choice on your behalf. Well, if you unbundle and buy electricity on one contract and energy attribute certificates on another, you have the freedom of choice yourself. And furthermore, for many companies in your sector, you have electricity consumption in many countries and in many regions. And if you have many electricity suppliers with different solutions to renewable energy sourcing, then you might end up in a very complex portfolio of different solutions globally. And this tracking mechanism or this documentation tool that we are talking about, that is now, I would say, global. So this map shows you where this tracking mechanism is in place and the different colors. If we start in Europe, you will see that most of Europe is green. That means that there's a pan-European system for guarantees origin. And there are some countries in orange with national systems. But all of Europe is covered with a proper energy attribute system. And in North America and the US, we also have a proper system in place. It is divided by different states, but it's covering the whole region of North America. And then we have Australia and Japan with national systems in the separate color there. And then finally, we have this system IREX, which is a energy attribute certificate system that is now being rolled out country by country and enabling corporate energy buyers to build a global portfolio of documentation of their renewable energy consumption. So this has happened quite fast, and we have moved from a more local and national approach to a global approach in only a few years. So in this first part, what we wanted to convey here is really that if you want to build a proper and credible renewable energy strategy, the energy attribute certificates is actually the only way that you can document renewable energy in a credible way, unless you have a direct link between you and the power station. So if there's a one-to-one relation between your consumption and the power station, then you don't need the energy attribute certificates, but in all other cases, you need it. Secondly, it's important to understand that the energy attribute certificate is issued based on actual production of renewable energy, and is then and it's linked to the physical production, and meaning that there is no possibility for double counting of attributes. And it's functioning worldwide. We have a question here before we move on. The question is, how can I claim that energy attribute certificates from my on-site production renewable energy? Do I need to take care of this if I feed it into the grid? Yes, that is actually the case. So if you feed your on-site production into the grid, you have to consider getting GOs or energy attribute certificates issued for that production in order to claim the attributes from your own on-site production. And as I mentioned, this energy attribute certificates are linked to the actual production of physical renewable energy. So 1 megawatt-hour of production of, let's say, wind power equals 1 energy attribute certificates. And then when you consume 1 megawatt-hour, you cancel 1 energy attribute certificate to prove the origin of that consumption. And each energy attribute certificates is unique. That means that they can be tracked back to a unique power plant, a unique point in time of production, and a unique ownership. So each energy attribute certificate contains a lot of information about the origin. And this is here illustrated by a fantastic photo or picture of the world's most beautiful power plant, which is built and run in the north of Norway. It is owned by Helgelandkraft, a regional electricity company. And the name is Øvre Forsland. And it's a fantastic story around that project. The Guardian, amongst others, has nominated it as the world's most beautiful hydropower plant, and it's just astonishing when it comes to both sustainability and how it looks and how they have thought around that project. It's unique in many senses. The reason why I bring it up is that since each energy attribute certificate is unique and can be tracked back to this power plant, you as an energy consumer can connect with this power plant. So it's not just about renewable energy, but it's about specific sites, specific origin, about the story around this power plant that can be connected to your products and your brand and your story. And one of the things that we hear again and again from you and other energy buyers is the impact. So how do I know that when I buy energy attribute certificates that something happened? How do I know that this actually matters, that this changes something? And yes, it's true that you can buy energy attribute certificates in a way that doesn't have any impact at all. It doesn't make any sense because it just goes into the black hole in a way. But since each energy attribute certificate is unique, you as a consumer can choose. You can put the requirements on your purchase and your procurement so that this actually has an impact. And just to give you some thoughts around that, we have put up 3 alternatives that we think is very interesting. And this is about how can you enable new renewable energy to be built by buying renewable energy with guaranteed origin. The first alternative is what we call a reinvestment clause. You say that, okay, I will buy these energy attribute certificates, but I want to be assured that the producer that sells them or produces them actually reinvests the money in new production of renewable energy. So that's a guarantee that follows the contract on the energy attribute certificates. Secondly, finger on the trigger. That's a short abbreviation for that actually you as a buyer, you expect the producer actually to keep that money in an account and use that only for new production of new projects. So that's more specific. You actually reserve the money in a escrow account or in your financial structure, so that you have a reserve for building new renewable projects. And the third alternative here is what we call future build. That means that you enter into a contract with a project developer or renewable energy, saying that, okay, if you build this windmill park or this solar installation or this hydropower plant, I will buy the energy attribute certificates from that power plant for a certain number of years into the future. And you sign that contract, and that contract is then part of the funding and financial establishment of the project. So you can enable the project owners to start building a project by giving them a commitment to buy these certificates when the project has been built and started to produce renewable energy. This is a very important way to speed up the change to a renewable energy society, because this gives direct impact on renewable energy, new renewable energy production. So this is more detailed on the three alternatives. So reinvestment clause. You enter into a contract, you buy the energy attribute certificates from an existing production. The producer receives the money and gives you back a confirmation that they have used that money for new renewable energy projects, meaning totally new sites, maybe upgrades or refurbishments of existing power plants. Secondly, finger on the trigger, the flow there. You buy from an existing renewable power plant. The money is put into an escrow account or reserved in the balance sheet of the producer, and then used for implementing new projects. And finally, future build. You enter into a contract about a specific project that has not yet been built, and when that renewable energy project has been established and started to produce, you receive the energy attribute certificates from it. On this last one, just to give you a small example of what this future build is, I want to bring you to a project called, it's Norwegian, so it might be difficult to understand, but it's called Godfarfoss. In English, we would say the Godfather Falls. So it's quite interesting name in itself, talking about renewable energy for the future generations and solving problems that our children will have to live with. So this is a project that is under planning. They are planning to take a decision this year, and they will, if they make the decision or are unable to get the funding in place, they will start to produce late in 2022. So this is then a future build project, concrete project that is looking for a way to get funding and financial instruments in place so that they are able to build this project. Just to set this into a little bit more of a context again. For you, when you work with energy in your companies, you need to consider how to, first of all, you need to consider how to reduce your energy consumption. Of course, the kilowatt hours that you don't use are the most sustainable ones, of course. Secondly, you have to consider what options you have to produce your own renewable energy. Sort of what are your possibilities, both when it comes to technology, financials, rights and stuff like that. And also market opportunities in the local markets where you are. Then finally, you have to consider your procurement of energy. And lastly, if you consider putting this into a carbon footprint context, you have to also consider if you want to offset your residual emissions. But what we're talking about here today is this procurement of electricity. So when you procure or buy electricity, when you enter into power contracts, this is when this comes up. And as you can see, this is part of your strategy when it comes to both carbon footprint and social responsibility. And also then, if you have a renewable energy strategy, the procurement is an important part. So to summarize a little bit here, you have the 4 alternatives when you want to create a effective renewable energy strategy. You can buy on-site, you can set up your own windmill, solar rooftops, as on-site production and use the EACs from them. Or you can invest in windmill parks as a direct investment and use the EACs from those windmill parks. You can enter into a corporate PPA and also get the energy attribute certificates from the same power plants. And finally, you can buy the energy attribute certificates bundled with your electricity contract or unbundled from your electricity contract. And when it comes to the strategy here, we consider and we see companies around the world starting to commit, or has for some years now started to commit to only use renewable energy. And for me personally, I think that is fantastic to see, because we know that if all companies around the globe decided today that they only were to use renewable energy, then the impact on the emissions of CO2 and other climate gases would drop significantly, and actually also quite fast. So to commit to use only renewable energy is probably one of the most important decisions a company can do today. And that is because we see that things are becoming more and more electrified, like the future is electric. But it's also renewable and it's digital. So in this world, to move to electricity and to document that it is coming from renewable sources, that is not just a part of, but a very important part of the solution to combating climate change. So coming back to this slide about building a strategy. So for a company that commits to maybe saying that, okay, in 2030 or even before, they want to be 100% renewable, they can build a stepwise approach towards that goal. For instance, they can start with buying only EACs from the market, and then they can build a strategy over time, becoming more and more impactful in what they do. So having a goal of being 100% renewable, and then also maybe introducing their own on-site, maybe corporate PPAs, and even these future build projects that can be linked to energy attribute certificates, could then enable you to become 100% renewable and show that you do it with transparency and impact. I think we have another question here. Does BECOUR offer services for the end user around branding, like that my company's product are products with renewable energy? If I understand the question correct, like If you are a customer-facing company and you want to enable your customers to see and choose products that are produced on renewable energy, and the question is then if we can support you in doing that, and that is what we do actually. We help you to increase the value of your products based on documenting the origin of the electricity used to produce it. So yes, that is services that we provide. I want to just bring this issue of renewable energy into a context of carbon reporting and carbon footprinting. I would assume that many of you know the greenhouse gas protocol and the division of emissions into 3 scopes. So we have scope 1, which is your direct emissions, the emissions coming out of your pipe in a way. Then you have scope 2, which are the emissions or indirect emissions coming from the import of energy that you do. An import of energy, that could be import of electricity, taking electricity from the grid, or it could be import of steam or heat or even cooling. So that's imported indirect emissions from that imported energy. And finally, you have the indirect emissions upstream and downstream from your core activity, called scope 3 emissions. And what we're talking about here is this. We're talking about the indirect scope 2 emissions. So what we are relating to here, and what the energy attribute certificates are relating to, is the carbon footprint of imported electricity to your core activity. And of course, when we use more and more electricity, when we are moving away from fossil fuels, when we are moving into a world that is based on getting electricity from the grid, then the emissions in scope 2 will become larger and larger for most companies. And in many sectors, the most of the emissions actually come from scope 2 already. So this is important for a large number of companies already, and it is becoming more and more important for companies as we move into a future with increasing use of electricity. So when you want to build an efficient strategy, we want to just compare to a couple of different elements in the strategy. And here we have put up a comparison between bundled energy attribute certificates and unbundled. So coming back to actually the question that was made earlier in the presentation. So bundled meaning where you enter into an electricity contract with an electricity supplier, and the electricity supplier has bundled the certificates into the solution. And then you have on the other side, you have an electricity contract, and you buy the energy attribute certificates separately. So if you buy bundled, we see that it is very hard for the company that enters into this power contract to have some kind of choices or be able to choose themselves. If they want to be specific on the energy source, for instance, they want wind power instead of hydropower, or they want new installations instead of existing installations, then that is very difficult with bundled energy attribute certificates. So you can really choose location, you can really choose technology, and it is also difficult to understand the impact of what you do, because it's usually difficult to see through the value chain that what you do actually leads to, for instance, more renewable energy production. And that is then, and also when it comes to the telling the story about renewable energy in your products and services, that is also more difficult when you have a bundle strategy, because of the above elements. If you are able to choose yourself, it's easier for you to to connect your messaging and your communication to the renewable energy. And finally, by buying unbundled certificates, it's easier for you to make sure that the amount of money that you pay for this actually ends up with the producer. That makes it more transparent, even though I will get back to the transparency a bit, but it at least makes it a little bit more possible for you to see through the value chain and see see where the money goes. I think we have a question here regarding other energy sources, and the question is, do you handle other energy than electricity? We handle first and foremost electricity. That is because that's where the mechanism for documentation of non-physical attributes has been developed furthest and is most mature. But we are also now looking into biogas and also other energy sources. So even though that is a little bit immature, especially in Europe yet, we are also helping clients in that space. And that is something we see more and more interest for, especially biogas. And we expect also the origin of hydrogen to become a very interesting topic in a few years. In order to sum this up a little bit, we see that CDP, Greenhouse Gas Protocol, RE100, and these initiatives are gathering a lot of attention and a lot of commitments. What we think is important here is, there we go. Important here to convey is that this is part of let's call it a quality process in any company, to set an ambition and then to execute on that and make an impact so that you can show to your own sustainability targets that you are progressing. And you do this to influence. You don't do this for philanthropic reasons or just to tick a box. I'm sure that companies around the world do this because they want to do more good, not just less bad. And in order to have an influence, transparency is extremely important. So when you buy renewable energy with energy attribute certificates, the transparency we think is here totally center in the impact of this. If the solution is not transparent, how do you know the impact on renewable energy production? How do you know where the money goes? How can you make a claim towards your internal and external stakeholders if the solution is not transparent? And then talking about transparency and complexity. Many companies have electricity consumption in many countries. And in the map, we have just illustrated that by these red pins. So in the end, you might end up with having different electricity consumptions in maybe 20, 30 countries. And you could then end up in a solution where you have this type of a strategy, where you have different solutions in every country. And some places you have bundle solutions with your electricity suppliers. Some places you have corporate PPAs. Some places you might have a solar rooftop. In some places you might have both unbundled certificates and so forth. And it creates a very complex map for you. So in order to level the field and create more structure, we recommend the corporates with the global electricity consumptions to make sure that all their sites are linked to energy attribute certificates. Because in that way, you can build one common communication platform and one common strategy on top of your geographic footprint. We have another question here. How common is it to match renewable energy in real time? Well, real time, first we have to define real time. Real time could be that it has to be in the same moment, meaning microsecond, that the production of renewable energy happens in the same microsecond as the consumption of electricity. That is something we don't see that customers are interested in. There might be some that has a vision of doing that, but it doesn't really make sense from the point of view of what you actually want to achieve. So what we see is that there are a group of customers or a group of companies around the world that has shown and are testing out hourly matching, and we see that that group is increasing. So they want to document that the production of renewable energy has happened in the same hour as they have their consumption of electricity. This we have seen, and this we see a growing interest for. The reason why this is we see a growing interest here, we think, is that this is enabling credibility. This makes it relevant for the customers. The sort of the tangible aspect of this becomes clear, that there's a production in the same hour. And this is something we expect to grow. We expect this to increase significantly in the time to come. Maybe not everybody wants an hourly resolution on their consumption of renewable energy, but we think many would like to see it at least on a monthly schedule. Moving into one important slide, actually. And this is a matrix where we talk about the different solutions that are out there: unbundled energy attribute certificates, bundled, on-site corporate PPAs, and direct investments. Then we have mapped them according to some items that we hear companies are focused about. So we have mapped them according to what kind of positive impact does the solution provide us with? What is the hedging potential in the solution? Does the solution help me to reduce my capex exposure? NGO, non-governmental organization scrutiny. What does the environmental organization say about what I do? How complex is actually the solution? What kind of flexibility does the solution give me? And finally, what kind of risks do I run by choosing this strategy element? I won't go through all of the elements here. So if you have questions on specific topics in this, please raise your hand and raise your question. I just wanted to highlight some. Up in the high left corner, you see that the unbundled energy attribute certificate has been given the color yellow when it comes to positive impact. Maybe I should just mention the colors. So red is giving a bad solution for the company entering into it, and yellow is let's call it a mixed bag. There are both good and bad elements in the choice, and green is from our side simply then viewed as a good solution. So yellow on unbundled energy attribute certificates means that there might be a positive impact from buying unbundled energy attribute certificates, but it might not be as well. And that depends on you when you put your requirements into your procurement. That is when you decide if your solution of buying unbundled energy attribute certificates will have impact or not. I guess I will not go into more detail on this than to also discuss a little bit on the complexity of corporate PPAs. So if we move to the right in this diagram, see the column called the complexity, and for corporate PPAs, you see that that is on red. The reason why I put red there is that by trying to enter into a corporate PPA, there are a lot of complexity that pops up. Normally, normally these contracts are very long. They are relating a lot of cash flow, and it's a high exposure. And there are also a lot of criteria related to the supply and production points in the grid and stuff like that. So when considering corporate PPAs, we see again and again that many companies say that they want to do corporate PPAs, but when they start to look into it, they understand that it doesn't really fit them. It might be too complex. It might be that their electricity consumption is not stable enough, meaning that maybe you move your activities from one country to another, and you then might be stuck with a corporate PPA in a country where you don't have electricity consumption anymore. Or you don't really want to use your balance sheet to meet the counterparty requirements in a corporate PPA. And you might also wonder, do I really need to use this much electricity so far into the future? So why should I then enter into a fixed price, fixed volume electricity contract now? So it adds a lot of complexity, and if the purpose of what you want to do is to show that you use renewable energy and show that you are supporting the transfer of the energy mix to a renewable energy mix, then corporate PPAs might be, but it also might not be the right step to take. So bringing this a little bit back to what it is about. Electricity is an ingredient in almost all products and services that we relate to as individuals today. So, when you build a car, when you sell a hotel room, when you produce a bread, when you travel, electricity is becoming more and more an important ingredient in that product. So then how that electricity is produced becomes more and more important for you and the products, or you and those that buy your products. So, renewable energy is more than a commodity. Electricity is a commodity, and it's a perfect commodity. But renewable energy has brand values that has to be shown and has to be used, and we call that ingredient branding. And it's important to enable you and other companies around the world to actually use that opportunity to use the origin of your electricity consumption in your brand building and product development. And here we have used Budweiser, which is a very interesting example, where they in Super Bowl a year ago approximately used this ad to tell the world that their beer is now brewed on wind power, and linking this to the Budweiser brand, which is a very good example of ingredient branding. I think we have another question here. How could the positive impact from unbundled energy attribute certificates be improved from medium to good? Very good question. That is up to you when you buy the EACs. So that is not about the system as such, but about you as setting the criteria for your procurement. So if you want to move from medium to good when buying energy attribute certificates, you have to put in requirements for instance, buying from specific power plants, and requirement could be that you want to know exactly what power plant you buy from, and that you could choose what power plants to choose from. It could be that you want to know how much of the money you pay actually ends up with the producer, and it could be that you want to know what the producer spends that money on, which means asking for a reinvestment clause, or even going into financing new renewable energy projects. So these criteria that you need to put in on top of just buying the energy attribute certificates, that is something that we can help with, and that is something that we think is very important in order to make this system relevant. Without these criteria on top, this system might be totally irrelevant, to be honest. We are getting closer to the end here. How are we on time? Yeah, we are still on. We have some minutes left, so I will also bring your attention to this last slide, one of the last slides, and this is about enabling transparency. This is about enabling choice. So as I mentioned earlier, in October last year, we launched this web shop for renewable energy, where you can go in and choose your own power plants. You buy the energy attributes from the power plants that you choose yourself. This platform is called React, and when we launched it, we got this funny feedback quite fast that hey, this looks like Tinder for renewable energy. And I think the person that said that was thinking about the difference between electricity as a commodity and React, because on React suddenly electricity is not the topic, but it's the origin, it's the entity, it's the attributes related to each and every site that is in focus. So for the producers then, it's about showing what attributes they can provide and to make their power plants as attractive as possible, meaning that they have to be more than renewable. There has to be a sustainability element to what they present. It's about conveying a story about impact, about transparency, and environmental credibility, not the least. So if you want to look more into that, please take a look at the react.becour.com, and we are happy to get feedback on that. So please take a look. So just to sum up then, sorry. So we have a sort of the summary of this presentation or webinar is the following points, or our recommendations. So when you want to set up a renewable energy strategy, you have to consider all your options and all your paths in order to get to your goal of only using renewable energy. And as we have talked about many times, that could be a mix of different strategy elements. But you always have to consider how to document your claims, and renewable energy certificates or energy attribute certificates is the tool to do that. We have a questions here, but I will just go through the summary and then I will come back to it. And then be ambitious. Like when you set your targets, be ambitious where you have the possibility to do so. As you know, we don't have a lot of time when it comes to transferring the world into a renewable energy system. So to push the timeline is very important because that is what your stakeholders are expecting you to do. And then you have to monitor and document your progress. And when you monitor and document, it is important to be able to do that in a credible way. So to have an assurance of what you claim is a strong recommended feature from us. That reduces the stakeholder scrutiny and potential bandwidth. And then when you have made your goals, then take decisions that are economically wise and rational, and then finally just keep on moving, because in this topic there's no solution that is sort of, there's no finish line. You have to always improve, and you have to always do things better. So keep on moving. We have a question here. So I can buy the energy attribute certificates directly from this React web shop? Yes, that is exactly what you can do. So the React web shop is a web shop where you can buy the energy attribute certificates directly from the power plants that you want to buy from. It's all done transparently, so that you have the possibility to choose. Is there any other questions? I think there's one person that has raised his hand or her hand. If you want to ask a question, please write it in the chat. So now we are at the end of the webinar, and now we are opening up for a Q&A session. And I am open for all questions that you might have, or also open to discuss on the chat any topics that you might want to raise linked to the presentations that we have had today. But before going into that, those that will leave us, thank you so much for listening in, and thank you for all the questions. I hope you have enjoyed the discussion and the presentation. You will see more of the material on our webpage later on. So then I will stop the presentation, and here you have my email address if you want to get in touch. So please send me a note if you want to discuss further also after this. So with that, I end the presentation, and I am open for questions.